The ferry came in at mid-morning, low on the water from 3 days of rain upriver, and the dock at Caulfield's Landing was slick enough that the ferryman did not bother to tie off properly. He threw the rope around the post and held it with his boot while his 2 passengers disembarked. One was a drummer with a sample case and a hat he kept touching to make sure the wind hadn't taken it. The other was a woman. She came off the plank with a canvas roll over one shoulder and a leather satchel in her other hand. And she stood on the dock the way a person stands when they are taking inventory of a place before deciding how much of themselves to put into it. Not cautious, deliberate. Her coat was gray wool, and her boots were the kind that had already seen years of work and would see years more. She set the satchel down and looked up the bank toward the town. Caulfield's Landing was not much to look at from the water. A feed mill on the near bank with its wheel half submerged and not turning. A main street of 3 blocks, a church, a livery, a general store with a porch wide enough to hold 4 men comfortably, which at present held 3. A row of houses climbing the hill behind, the kind of town that had been named with optimism and had settled into adequacy. She looked at the mill wheel first. She looked at it the way a person looks at a thing they are already diagnosing. Then she picked up the satchel and went up the bank. The miller's name was Doyle, and he had broken 2 fingers on his left hand in July and set them himself, and they had not healed straight. She could see it when he came out of the mill to meet her. The way his hand hung from the wrist, the 2 outer fingers angled slightly wrong. The whole hand used less than the other. He was maybe 45, lean in the way of men who work physically and eat what is in front of them and nothing more. He looked at her, then at the canvas roll on her shoulder, then back at her. She told him she was a stone dresser, that she had dressed millstones from Pennsylvania to Missouri, and the reference letter in her satchel was from a mill in Saline County if he wanted to read it. He did not reach for the letter. He said the stone had been running slow since spring, that the flour was coming out coarser than it should, and the farmers were complaining, and he had lost 2 contracts to the mill in Denison, 12 miles east. He said a man from Denison had come to look at the stone in August and said it needed full replacement, which would cost more than he had. He said this flatly, not asking for sympathy, just arranging the facts. She asked to see the stone. He took her inside. The mill house smelled of flour dust and old wood, and the particular cold damp of a building that sits close to water. The runner stone was seated in its case, iron rind in place, the hopper above it silent. She crouched beside the case and looked at the furrow pattern on the face of the stone. She did not touch it yet. She looked at it the way her father had taught her to look, not at one furrow, but at the whole face, the relationship between the lands and the grooves. The way the pattern met the eye as geometry before it met it as surface. She could see the problem without a pick. The face had glazed, not worn away, glazed, which was different, which meant the stone was still sound beneath, the face simply closed over. A closed stone could not cut. It pushed grain rather than shearing it, and pushed grain made coarse flour, and coarse flour lost contracts. She stood and told him she could dress it. 4 days, possibly 5, she would need a pick set, a paintbrush, and lamp black for the proving. If he had a straight edge of any kind, she would use that too. He said he had a straight edge. He did not mention wages yet. She did not ask. There was a back room above the sluice gate with a cot and a small window that faced the mill pond. He showed it to her without preamble. She set her satchel on the cot and looked out the window at the wheel, sitting motionless in the brown water below. She would start in the morning. She was in the mill house before dawn, with her pick in her hand, and the lamp set close to the stone face, when the door at the back of the mill house opened and a child came through it. The girl was perhaps 8 or 9, in a dark pinafore and barn boots that were too large for her, and she walked without any particular hesitation toward the stone where the woman was crouching. She stopped about 3 feet away and looked at the pick and then at the stone. "What's the black for?" she said. "To see the high spots," the woman said. "You spread it on the face and then check the stone against a straight surface. Wherever the black transfers, that's where the stone is too high. That's where you cut." The girl looked at the stone. "Is it like a map?" She considered this. Yes, she said, it's exactly like a map. The girl crouched beside her without being invited, which was either boldness or simple practicality. She could not tell which, and suspected the girl herself had never made the distinction. The girl's name was Lena. She said it herself, unprompted, the way children introduce themselves when they have decided a person is worth knowing. She showed her the proving. Spread the lamp black, lay the straight edge, read the transfer. Lena watched without touching anything, which was more disciplined than most adults, showed around a thing they were curious about. My father does the stone, Lena said. He used to. His hand, the woman said. The fingers. Lena nodded as if this was a settled matter. He can still do some things, but not the fine ones. They worked together in the early light, which meant that Lena held the lamp while the woman worked the pick and asked questions at intervals, and the woman answered them without stopping her hands. The furrow pattern required precision, each groove cut at the correct angle to catch the grain and move it outward. Each land left smooth enough not to damage the flour, but rough enough to grip. It was not unlike a conversation. The stone said what it needed, and the pick responded, and the result was either true or it wasn't. When the light had come up fully and the sounds of the town outside had begun, a horse at the livery, smoke from the boarding house chimney. She heard him. The miller. He was standing in the doorway with a coffee cup in his right hand and his left held close to his side, watching them. Not watching her work, exactly. Watching the two of them together, his daughter with the lamp held steady and the woman with the pick, both of them attending to the same task. He did not come in. He set a second cup on the edge of the grain bin near the door, where she would pass it on her way out, and he went back to the yard. She kept working. When she passed the grain bin an hour later, she picked up the cup. The coffee was still warm. By the third day, she had the face trued and was beginning the finish work that would determine how the stone ran. She had found in the process that the rind was seated slightly off-center. Not badly, not catastrophically, but enough. A fraction of an inch of imbalance in a millstone translated to vibration, and vibration over months became wear in uneven patterns. And uneven wear became exactly the problem Doyle had been trying to fix by replacing the stone rather than reading the stone. She did not announce this. She shimmed the rind herself. With a piece of sheet iron, she asked the blacksmith at the end of the main street to cut to dimension. She had the dimension in her head. She wrote it on a scrap of brown paper and handed it across his workbench without explanation. His name was Rafe, and he was a large man with a careful face. The kind of face that had learned over years to commit to very little before it had all the information. He looked at the paper. He looked at her. He cut the piece. She thanked him and walked back to the mill house. She was fitting the shim when the sounds from the main street changed, a brief lull in the ordinary noise, the kind that meant something had shifted. She did not stop working. She fitted the shim, checked the seat, checked it again. Whatever had changed outside was outside. When she passed the general store that afternoon for lamp oil, the woman behind the counter, Mrs. Bellum, wide-shouldered and deliberate in her movements, measured her for a moment before going to the back shelf. She set the oil tin on the counter without the comment that had been in her face when she first turned around. She took the payment and made change. At the door, the woman heard her speak to someone at the back of the store. The words did not carry. The tone did. She did not slow down. She walked back to the mill house and set the oil on the workbench and picked up her pick and went back to work. The rain came in the night between the fourth and fifth day. Not the ordinary Kansas rain that came and was done, the other kind. The flat, patient, relentless kind that came in off the plains and meant to stay. She lay on the cot above the sluice gate and listened to it. She listened to it the way she listened to everything in a new place. Not with alarm, but with attention. The mill pond would be rising. The drainage channel that ran from the pond to the lower field had been silted up since August. She had seen it, her second morning walking the perimeter of the mill property, her eyes running over the ground the way they always ran over things, registering detail without deciding in advance what mattered. A silted drainage channel was not her problem. She had been hired to dress a millstone. She lay still and listened to the rain. In the morning, she dressed in the gray light and went out to the mill pond. The water was already 8 inches higher than it had been at dusk. The drainage channel had gone to mud at its mouth, its opening nearly closed. 2 more days of this and the lower yard would flood. The harvest wagons had been queuing at the edge of town for 3 days already, waiting on her to finish the stone. A flooded approach road meant no wagons, and no wagons meant no grain, and the mill she had just trued up would run for nothing. She went to the tool shed for a spade. The work was straightforward. Clear the mouth of the channel, drive the packed silt back to where the water could move it. Cold work, knee-deep in the edge of the pond in the rain, the spade going in and coming up heavy. She did not think about it much. Her hands knew what they were doing, and her mind went quiet in the way it went quiet when the body was working right. She was driving the last section of silt clear when she heard the gate. Lena, in a canvas coat that came to her knees, carrying a tin pail with a cloth tied over the top. She stood at the bank and looked at the cleared channel, at the brown water beginning to move through it, at the woman standing in the mud with the spade. She did not ask about the channel. She set the pail on a dry stone near the bank and said breakfast was there if she wanted it. She climbed out of the pond. She ate standing up, biscuits and a jar of last season's preserves and a hard-boiled egg. Lena sat on the fence rail and watched the water run. It was moving well now. By midday, it would be clear. She handed the cloth back folded. Lena took the pail and walked back toward the house without making a ceremony of leaving. Just a direction, the way children change directions. The stone was dressed and ready on the afternoon of the 6th day. She had taken longer than she had said she would, and she knew the reasons. The rind, the channel, the small accumulations. She did not apologize for them. They had needed doing. Doyle came in when she called him. He stood beside the stone and looked at the face. He crouched in the way of a man whose knees have been crouching for decades, and he ran the fingers of his good hand across the furrow pattern. Not testing her work, she understood the difference. He was reading it. He had dressed stone himself before the hand. He knew what he was looking at. He stood up. He did not say anything for a long moment. "I'll set the water gate," he said finally. She stood back while he opened the sluice. Outside, the wheel caught the current and began to turn. She could feel it before she could hear it. The low vibration through the millhouse floor, the rhythm of the runner engaging the bedstone. Then the sound, even and smooth, the stone running true. She had known it would. She had known it from the moment the shim seated right. The first flower came down the chute, pale and fine. Doyle caught a handful and rubbed it between his fingers. He looked at it. He set it down on the bin edge and went outside without a word. She stayed and listened to the stone run. She found the thing at the blacksmith's the next morning. She had gone to return the spade she had borrowed from the tool shed. It was not his spade, but she had left it leaning against his fence in the rain, and on the workbench beside his forge was a set of millstone picks, not new but reforged. The tips restruck, the heads dressed back to proper weight. Her picks, she had set them on the fence post the previous afternoon, meaning to carry them to the mill house. He had reforged them overnight. Rafe was at the anvil, working something unrelated, and he did not look up when she came in, and he did not look up when she stood beside the bench. She picked up the picks. They were balanced better than before. She had not asked for that. She could feel the difference in the first grip. She set them back in her canvas roll. She walked back to the mill house. She did not mention it at supper. There was nothing to say. Rained again Thursday. She sat at the end of the workbench in the mill house with her account book open, working through the small diagrams she had been building in the margins. Not the millstone. The ferry mooring post at the landing. She had seen the rot in the base timber on her first day, the way the post gave a fraction of an inch when the ferry rope pulled against it. It would not hold another winter. It was not her problem. The diagram was there anyway. Her father had believed that if a thing was worth fixing, it was worth knowing how to fix it properly, and that knowing how to fix it properly meant drawing it first. You built it on paper before you built it in timber. The paper version cost nothing to get wrong. She was refining the bolt pattern for the new foot iron when the mill house door opened. Doyle came in from the rain with water on his shoulders and his left hand tucked against his ribs. He went to his bench. She did not look up. She heard him behind her, the particular sound of a man searching a drawer for something specific. He stopped. She felt the stillness. The way a sound stops and the absence of it is its own kind of information. She kept her pencil moving, a dimension line across the timber face, even and deliberate. He reached past her, not over but beside, his arm extended to one side without touching, and moved the lamp from the wall hook to a place on the bench closer to where she was working. The circle of light widened across the open pages. He went back to his bench without speaking. She did not look up until the diagram was finished. The rain kept on. The millstone ran steady in the background, a low continuous hum below everything else. She turned to the next page. She had been in Caulfield's Landing for 11 days when she carried her canvas roll and her satchel down from the loft above the sluice gate and set them on the grain bin and stood there with her hands at her sides. The stage ran Tuesdays and Fridays. It was Friday. She thought about the mill in Saline County that had offered her winter work. About the account book with its careful columns and the number at the bottom of the last page, which was enough, barely, to take her somewhere that was not here. She thought about these things with the methodical, sequential logic her father had taught her. One thing following the next in the order it actually came. The millstone was running. The drainage channel was clear. The cracked window pane in the ferry office. She had noticed it Monday. She had replaced the glass on Wednesday morning, sourcing the piece from the general store and setting it with putty she had mixed herself. Mrs. Belham had come to the window to watch from inside and had not said anything and had gone back to her counter. The mooring post was still rotted. She picked up the canvas roll. She went down to the tool shed and found the spade. She was on the dock in late afternoon, the new post set and the foot iron bolted and the concrete she had mixed beginning to cure in the base, when she heard him on the planks behind her, not Lena. His step, the particular weight she had learned over 11 days without meaning to, the unhurried sound of a man who moved at the pace the task required and not faster. She did not turn. He came and stood beside her on the dock. The mill pond was visible up the bank, the wheel turning in the gray afternoon light. He was carrying 2 tin cups. He set one on the dock rail near her without comment. She picked it up with both hands. The coffee was hot. Below them, the river ran, the new post set solid in the mud of the bank. The mooring ring level and true. The rope from the ferry could not pull it now. Not this winter, not the next. She had seen to that. Lena's voice came from up the bank, somewhere near the mill house yard. Brief and clear, and not looking for an answer, the sound a child makes when she is working something out on her own. He drank from his own cup, she drank from hers. Her canvas roll was in the tool shed. Her satchel was on the grain bin inside the mill house. She had brought neither of them to the dock. She had brought only the spade, which was leaning against the post she had just set, and there was no stage on Saturdays, which was what tomorrow was. And by Tuesday the concrete would be fully cured, and she would know for certain whether the bolt pattern had been right. She had not gotten that far in her accounting yet. She was still on today. The light let go of the far bank first, the way it always did, then the water, then the dock itself, the dark coming up slowly from below the way water rises, not falling but filling in. The first star appeared above the tree line across the river, then a second. The stone was running. The channel was clear. The post would hold. She had both hands around the cup, and the tin was warm against her palms, and the river moved on past them in the dark. And she did not say anything, and he did not say anything, and she was not counting days anymore. She had stopped somewhere between the spade and the coffee, and the single star that became 2, and she understood, standing there, that she had probably stopped before that, had stopped the morning. Lena held the lamp steady without being asked, had stopped the night. The lamp was moved closer to her work without a word spoken, had known it the way she knew a stone was trued before she checked it with the straight edge, because that was not hope she was feeling. It was recognition. She stayed.